Yo, what's good YouTube? It's your boy Francis, bro, and today we are going to be reacting to the dark truth behind the Spider-Verse delays. You guys loved my past reaction video, where I was about Pusha T and Travis Scott. So today we are going to be reacting to the dark truth behind the Spider-Verse delays. Shout out to Miguel Monroe. Make sure you guys go subscribe to him. And yeah, man, let's get straight into the video.
March 29th, 2024. The date Spider-Man Beyond the Spider-Verse was supposed to be released in cinemas.
And sadly it did not release because of the flipping animators, bro, and they quit halfway through.
Been nearly a full year since then, and not only has the movie not been released, Sony hasn't even announced a release year.
That's crazy.
To me, this all seemed incredibly weird, and the more I dug, the more bizarre it got. The movie's been plagued by delays, drama, and a production nightmare that Sony doesn't want you to know about. But the truth? It's even worse than you think. I've gone and dug up all the information so we can talk about how we got here and what this all means for not only Sony and the franchise, but the rest of the industry too. Let's rewind all the way back to the beginning. Into the Spider-Verse. This was Sony's big gamble, a film they hoped would redefine their animation studio's reputation after years of atrocious movies. No one could have predicted just how massive a success it would be though. Well,
So say massive.
Almost no one. Even during production, there were signs that Into the Spider-Verse was something special. Its bold, hand-drawn comic book aesthetic, seamlessly blended with CGI, was already being described as revolutionary.
Revolutionary, chat. Revolutionary.
But behind the scenes, things weren't nearly as smooth. See, Phil Lord and Rodney Rothman, the writers behind Miles Morales' cinematic debut, clearly wrote an incredible story. But less than a year before release, they decided to change the story and overhaul the entire third act.
Wow.
Completely
why you change the story, like to make it better, or like you didn't know what like was gonna be bad or some shit, like never know, man.
Writing and restructuring the movie's climax. That's an honestly insane decision that threw
fucking same, bro, dead ass.
The entire production into chaos, forcing animators and artists to completely scramble under extreme pressure. Still, Into the Spider-Verse not only became one of Sony's highest grossing films,
it was amazing. The best movie I've ever watched. Like No Glaze, that movie, and Across Spider-Verse, the two best movies I ever watched, bro. And I cannot wait. I cannot fucking wait for Beyond Spider-Verse, the best trilogy of all time.
It won the Oscar for Best Animated Feature.
Spider-Man Into the Spider-Verse.
So no harm done, right? Well, not quite. That last-minute, high-pressure creative process, yeah, it set a precedent that would have major consequences down the line. Now, here's where things get interesting. Even before Into the Spider-Verse hit theaters, Sony was so confident in its potential that they had already started early work on a sequel. The film's insane success in 2018 only cemented that decision, and by November 2019, Across the Spider-Verse was officially...
Dude, that's like 4 years. That's nice.
Announced. The studio wasted no time hyping it up, but then silence. Months passed, then an entire year. By 2020, updates on the sequel were scarce, aside from one major change. Sony pushed the release date from April 2022 to October 2022. It wasn't until early 2021, a whole year and a half after the sequel was announced, that producer Chris Miller revealed they were still working on the script. That might not seem unusual, after all, some scripts take years to refine. But for a movie that was already announced and dated, that was a pretty big red flag. As expected, the October 2022 deadline became impossible to meet. And in December 2021, Sony delayed the movie again, this time by an entire goddamn year. pushing it all the way to June 2023. But that wasn't the only surprise we got. They also announced that Across the Spider-Verse would now be the first of a two-part story, with
Let's
Beyond
go.
the Spider-Verse being developed alongside it. Keep that
Let's go.
in mind as you watch the rest of this video. Originally, Across the Spider-Verse was supposed to be roughly the same size as its predecessor, but that's not what happened. Instead, it ballooned into an enormous production with the largest crew of any animated film ever at the time.
Damn.
Nearly 1,000 artists. That's honestly nuts.
1K artists? I mean, the movie was good, so yeah, I can't complain.
But as we'll soon see, ambition without structure comes at a pretty steep cost. Despite having such a massive crew, production on Across the Spider-Verse was anything but smooth. Reports started to surface that over 100 artists
Oh yeah, 100 artists quit because I think they were being like underpaid. So that's why they quit.
had left the project due to extreme overwork, causing large
Overwork. Phil Lord, why did you make 100 artists quit? You made 10% of 1,000 artists quit. Phil Lord, what the fuck is wrong with you, bro?
large part by Phil Lord's management style. When 10% of your team quits, there's clearly something
That's
wrong.
definitely
Animators were being asked to make last-minute changes to fully rendered sequences, something that is usually unheard of in the animation industry at that stage of production. Normally, major rewrites and changes happen early, during the storyboarding process, but
Damn, the storyboard and that's just
on Across the Spider-Verse, sequences were being torn apart and redone long after they should have been locked. Animators described the working conditions as absolutely brutal, with some
brutal. So like, really fucking bad.
reporting 11-hour work days, 7 days
That's crazy, man.
a week for over a year to
So you're doing 77 hours of work a week. Damn. 77 fucking hours of work. No rest. Mad. That's crazy.
compensate for the lost time. The core issue stemmed from Phil Lord being ridiculously indecisive creatively and
Just
having
do what you want,
utmost
man.
control. He would even have final say against the directors. If Phil has a note that contradicts their notes, his note takes precedence. While his creative oversight obviously played a key role in shaping Across the Spider-Verse into an incredible movie, it also led to an
Incredible.
exhausting and
Amazing.
chaotic production process. Any singular change in the story often involved animation, final layout, cloth and hair effects, which have to repeatedly be redone anytime there's an animation change, the department that passes over the characters with ink lines and does all this crazy stuff like explosions, lighting and compositing, editing. These are a lot of artists affected by one change. Imagine an endless stream of them. It's not a surprise that morale was incredibly low during production, with a lot of people reassessing if this was even something they wanted to be a part
Bro. Nah, for some Morales, bro, like, maybe around an S, so like, yeah.
of. On top of the demanding hours, many workers faced financial and job insecurity. Sony Pictures Imageworks, the studio handling the animation, is not a union studio, meaning artists had very little bargaining power and low pay, with the animators being
They
underpaid.
underpaid, which means they quit. Because you're a multi-billion-dollar company and you just can't pay the people who made this amazing fucking 2 movies. It was incredible, but you just can't pay your animators and you can't give them rest, because if you give them rest and you pay them, they'll be happy and they will keep working. But because of that, now the movie has been delayed to 2027 because this guy called Phil Lord, he would pay his animators, would give them rest, and now it's just been delayed. It's just sad, man.
It forced many of them to rely on overtime pay just to make ends meet. Living in an expensive city like Vancouver made matters worse.
Now you can sell for free on eBay.
This is crazy.
You'll see things differently.
with some struggling to cover costs despite working excessive hours. For international artists, the situation was even scarier. Many were working off visas and saw SPI as their best chance to stay in Canada, making it difficult to push back against the grueling conditions or leave the project. They were forced to endure long hours, low pay, and constant pressure.
Long hours, low pay, constant pressure. If you just reduce the pressure, give them more pay, no long hours, we could have had this movie expected to be in about 2024, 2025, but no, I have to wait 2 years. 575.
Just to maintain job security. A Vulture report also detailed how some animators left because they physically couldn't sustain.
They couldn't take it anymore. You're giving them low pay. You're making them work overtime. You're giving them no rest. You're making them work 80 hours a week. Like, bro, your body is going to be dead. 77 hours a week. And, bro, literally, if you had to work that every single day, you'd have to work 28,105 hours a year. Like that's crazy, bro.
The workload, while others pushed through months
crazy.
of intense crunch just to meet shifting creative demands. One artist described the experience as death by 1,000 paper cuts, with changes constantly undoing progress. Another stated that despite loving the final film, they would never work on a project with Phil Lord again. Across the Spider-Verse may have been a stunning achievement, but behind the scenes, it came at a steep human cost. That being said, Across the Spider-Verse finally hit theaters in June of 2023, 5 years after the first movie. It was a massive success, earning over $690 million at the box office. But behind the scenes, the production nightmare had left its mark.
Look, it's not good for your health. That's why they literally left. They couldn't take it anymore. Burnout, chronic stress, anxiety, depression. See? Phil Lord.
Many animators walked away, unwilling to endure another grieving process for the sequel. And then there was Beyond the Spider-Verse, a film that was supposedly being worked on simultaneously. Except it wasn't. Not only was Beyond the Spider-Verse nowhere near completion when Across the Spider-Verse released, but the Vulture report suggests that production hadn't even started. It's no...
It didn't even start as well. Low pay, making your animators stress, depression. You're even like, shit, what else? I forgot the rest.
Surprised that we've recently heard actors say voice work hasn't even begun in 2025. That's a huge red flag. In animation, voice recording usually happens before or during early animation, as it helps animators match character movements and emotions to the performances. The fact that they haven't started means one thing. The movie isn't just delayed, it's nowhere close to being.
It's nowhere close because animators quit. Low pay. You're making them stress so fucking much that they physically couldn't take it anymore. So they left. All because of film. It's because you don't want to pay. You don't want to give them rest. Mad. You're just crazy.
Finished. To make matters worse, Sony initially blamed the delays on the Hollywood strikes of
Actors are even going on strike too.
2023. While it's true that the SAG-AFTRA strike halted a lot of productions, nearly every Sony movie that was delayed due to the strikes has since been released or has a confirmed release date. Beyond the Spider-Verse is the only exception. Not only does it not have a release date, it doesn't even have a confirmed release year. That makes absolutely no sense unless there are far bigger issues happening behind the scenes. And then there's this
June 4th, 2027 is when Beyond Spider-Verse release, guys. Just telling you.
script. Rumors have circulated that Beyond the Spider-Verse's script was completely rewritten after Across the Spider-Verse released,
no
though
way.
both composer Daniel Pemberton and producer Chris Miller have denied this. But even if it wasn't fully rewritten, we know that Into the Spider-Verse went through massive rewrites just a year before release. So it really wouldn't be surprising or far-fetched if Beyond the Spider-Verse is facing similar last-minute overhauls. This is clearly how Phil Lord works. In early 2024, we got another bizarre update. Composer David hinted at a 2025 release, teasing that one of his songs would be in the movie. But then Karen Sony said in August 2024 that voice recording was starting in a few months. Fast forward to December and January, and like I said, we know recording hasn't even begun. How is it possible that months later they're still in the same place? And that someone that's part of the movie thought it would be released in 2025, even though Sony has confirmed that's not gonna happen. This could all potentially mean animation hasn't even started yet, and if we compare this to past Spider-Verse films, Beyond the Spider-Verse is years.
But imagine like they haven't even like started now, but they just gave out the release date and the month and the year. Imagine it like push it back to like 2028, 2029. That's another
away from completion. I mean, honestly, with the lack of updates and the fact that voice recording is only just starting, I really cannot see this movie being released before 2027 or 2028. So what is actually going on here? The dark truth is that Phil Lord's control.
So I have to wait the rest of this year. 6 months. 12 months. Then 6 months again.
Over these movies, while instrumental to their success, has also created a grueling work environment that pushes animators to their absolute breaking points. Artists are tired of being overworked, and Lord's frequent changes and revisions is likely the real reason Beyond the Spider-Verse is taking so goddamn long, especially with how imperative it is to get this last movie absolutely perfect. Also with the underpaid...
I'm just praying they make it perfect. It'll be the best trilogy of all time. No, not the best animated trilogy of all time. That would be amazing.
Overworked nature of this project, it's likely that a lot of people were turned off from working on it, which doesn't help in speeding up production. The fact that Sony is keeping everything so secretive only raises more questions. There hasn't been a single teaser, a single frame.
I don't know, bro. What the fuck?
Of footage, nothing. Compare that to Across the Spider-Verse, which had a teaser released a full year and a half before it hit theaters. This lack of transparency makes me feel like Sony themselves don't even know when the movie might be ready. The situation only gets more worrying when you look at how this might impact the rest of the industry. The Spider-Verse movies have been hailed as some of the most innovative animation films ever made, pushing the boundaries of what's possible in Western animation. But this level of artistry comes at a massive cost, one that's increasingly difficult to justify in an industry where animators are burning out faster than ever. These are the brutal realities of animation production, especially at major studios like Sony, where extreme overwork is usually treated as the norm. Sony's inability to provide a structured production pipeline combined with Lord's insane creative approach has created a work environment that is not even remotely sustainable. If this pattern continues, it raises serious questions about the future of animation as a whole. Will studios keep pushing for bigger, more ambitious projects at the expense of their workers, or will we finally see a shift in the industry where proper planning and fair labor practices take precedence over last-minute perfectionism? Does it even make sense?
Just buying any old toothpaste? To be fair, I was too. But the new Colgate Total Active Prevention regime is 50
to try to replicate this incredible animation style, if it might take a studio 6, 7, 8, 9 years to produce it if they're not overworking animators. It starts to become hard to envision investing so much into these types of projects while keeping working conditions healthy. The animation industry is at a crossroads, and the
The way it just fly.
outcome of Beyond the Spider-Verse's production could set a precedent for years to come. And what about the Spider-Verse franchise itself? The longer this delay drags on, the more momentum the series risks losing. Thankfully, us Spider-Verse fans are extremely patient, and I think I can speak for many of us when I say I'd rather a polished, perfected product in 10 years than something rushed in 5. But who knows? The excitement that Into the Spider-Verse and Across the Spider-Verse generated could slowly fade away.
Yeah, because they are taking time. So the excitement and the hype will just fade away because they're taking too much time.
Leaving Beyond the Spider-Verse is an afterthought. The truth is, Sony finds itself in an impossible situation. Either they rush Beyond the Spider-Verse to meet expectations and risk
No, don't rush it because they're gonna like make it worse. But if they try not make 100 animators fucking quit again, they actually pay them and you actually do your job right, then yeah, that we could get this movie sooner and it would be more
grueling,
amazing.
overworked production, or they take
Gwen, Peter Parker, India, Hobie,
their time at the
Because
cost of the
Spider-Man-
audience losing interest. I'm personally
movie is
hoping
gonna be
that
so
all of
great.
these delays and lack of updates simply means the studio is giving the team all the time it needs to get this right with zero pressure from external deadlines. If that's the case, and this movie turns out perfect, then this could be an incredible example for other animation studios to point to in terms of how to run production. That being said, it is clear that Beyond the Spider-Verse is in a state of complete uncertainty.
Yeah.
Whether it's due to rewrites, animators pushing back against unfair conditions, or just complete mismanagement, one thing is clear. We are a long way from seeing Miles Morales return to the big screen. And unless Sony changes the way it approaches these productions, this might not be the last time we see an animated Sony movie stuck in limbo. The Spider-Verse films were meant to revolutionize animation, but if they're not careful, they might just become a cautionary tale.
Thank you guys so much for watching the video. Make sure you guys like, subscribe, and comment for more. And I will see you guys in the next video. Peace out.